you're going to grow out of is rigidity. Yeah, in the beginning you may need rigidity, but it doesn't have to stay that way. You're going to grow, yeah, with the hopes that your sobriety will be established, and then add other things. You know, things will land, yeah, in your life, and your life will get bigger, and you'll have a way of life to allow that to continue. I don't think it has to become like a fundamentalist army, you know, in my view. So I've been a little angry in my community. Yeah, today I was like, just went off on a thing. And I have some cred, I'm 31 years sober, so, and I'm going, you know, everyone with the sponsee, it's like you got your little herd, and you branded Paul Hedderman, the lineage of Paul, you know what I mean? It's a verb, sponsoring. It's happening all the time. If that's not happening, the nouns are auxiliary. They're just changed. But the verbing is the key, yeah? So, whatever. So, you know, I know you're not asking me any suggestions, but I'm going to give you any suggestions just for recovery. The most important in hindsight thing to do is get the right habits in place the first year. Because you got to just follow the diagnosis. The diagnosis is the problem resides in the mind, yes? So how does it, what is its activity? The thoughts, obviously. That's how it communicates to you, through thoughts and interpreting perceptions where it will see threats where there aren't any threats, stuff like that. It attempts to bring you to a red alert and then say, well, what the fuck, and then drink, and then it has you, you know, that from that point on you use for transportation. So, all right, so if the problem resides in the mind, this is what the diagnosis is, then you don't want the mind to have much to say about the sobriety. Obviously, you want to get that out of the question. So a habit is an action without thought. Yeah, so where most actions, alcoholic actions, are thoughts compelling an action, fucking insane thought telling you to do something, you do it and then you're jackpotted. Well, this is, you know, you don't want the thoughts involved in your sobriety, you know, because they're going to tell you you're not sober, it's never going to last. It's just propaganda constantly. So habits, getting the right habit. What are those? Well, you get commitments, you get to say hello to newcomers, try to sit in the front when there's a speaker, pay attention to whatever, not what they're saying, but the saying of it, yeah? Some people I don't listen to, I mean, they're rote, they say the same thing, but I listen to the saying of it, yeah? That's the conscious contact. There's a hearing of what's being said, I'm into that, you know? So you're sitting, you're just hearing, seeing, feeling, tasting, touching. And it obviously, at first, because the obsession with self, it has the interest and attention like this. So we want to break it out of there. So meetings are one way of doing it, because other people other than yourself are going to talk. So you're going to there and you can let the attention go to them and them and then. And as soon as the attention and interest, after a little bit of time, realizes this isn't the reality. This isn't the only, it's not like orbiting around this fucking idea of ball. I can go out. And in fact, there's a sense of freedom when it's out, not like this, but out. So, and the AA way of life, or NA, whatever, they have so many meetings, they'll give you an opportunity, because you could spend a whole day just listening to you all day. Yeah, you could. You can just buy shit on Amazon, fucking 2-day delivery. There's no talking to anybody, really. You know, you could just be, and yet there's a lot of talking going on. You're listening to something. You might as well listen to something else. So today they read this part of this book, it says, and I knew it said something else, but it says, your sobriety depends on constant thoughts of others, but doing something. So I said, well, wait a minute. Then I should have been sober a long time ago, because most of the time I'm having constant thoughts of others. I'm taking inventory all day. doing something else, but I said they should have an asterisk around that and explain that with some clarification, because most people, they're having tons of thoughts of others. They fuck me, and victim, you know, it's all this. So, you know, and the guy came on me. But you know, it says, I know, yeah, I just was having some fun with that, because I think we're all very adept at that. We've been sitting here thinking of others all day. So, not in that way, you know, that fucker. So, yeah, so that's my suggestion. Yeah, and then your head is going to tell you that you don't want it or whatever. Don't, you know, just see where your feet are. That will tell you where you are, yeah? Don't listen to the head. If you can't, you cannot help but listen to the head. So try to divert it. Yeah, that's why we do service and work with others, because it pulls the attention off of you. Yeah, and it's all the attention and interest. It really is. We're in a very concentric, it's the orbit of self-centeredness just doesn't stay like this, it tightens. See, it's almost like a strange score, you know what I mean? It's not like a moon around the earth, it keeps getting closer. Yeah, it's very, almost like if you're wrapping saran wrap, you know, you'd still be able to say, I'm seeing after 5 layers, but after 50, you can legally say you're seeing, but you're really not seeing. You're seeing through 50 layers of obscuring. Yeah. So, yeah. All right, so that's it. We'll start the meeting now. Just wanted to get that out there. AA blurb. Oh, was it on? All right.
The first part, no.
All right, well, that's fine.
That's the teaser.
That's the teaser. Yeah. Now, this is the thing. Again, how are we affixed? And I'm not talking, when I say we, I'm not implying the body as I. You know, I'm talking about we as mind, yeah? So how are we affixed to the system that's promoting a lot of irritability, restlessness, and discontent? Yeah? Because usually if you were somewhere and it sucked, you could leave, yeah? You know, you could just fucking leave. Or if you couldn't leave, you just disassociate, or start drinking a lot of gin and tonics, or start eating. Somehow, you would check out of that place, yeah? And it seems to be a successful strategy, because there's the place in you. And so, when there's the place in you, and the place is really the cause of the irritability, you can leave. But in this situation we're speaking about, that's not applicable. Because you are identified as the system. So when you obviously become aware or conscious of the irritability, restlessness, and discontent, that same provocation occurs. You want to get out of it, but see, the system has you locked in, because you try to get out of it as the system. Yeah. Now we have an observation in recovery, and it's stated as self can't get out of self. That's exactly what I'm implying, yeah? So, a lot of us may know or not know, I'm just sharing how I've seen it, or I'm seeing it, is I believe really what we're seemingly in is in the act of being identified as something we're not, really, yeah? And so, and when you're in the act of being identified as something you're not usually aware of that. That's sort of the trick of the system. You start at the after of the verbing of the act of being identified as self. That's where you come. That's where you feel you are. You're like a product, yeah? You don't see the production, you see from the product. This is the idea of the aperture opening up and more is revealed. So right now, you see, oh, all this stuff's driving me crazy, but the idea of you isn't revealed. Yeah. And a lot of revelations, the you isn't revealed. The revelation is held as I had a revelation. Yeah. So we're just trying to speak, hey, all right, so There's the act of being identified as self, and somehow in this place, I think this place starts right there. This place and you are synonymous. In other words, the dreamt and the dreaming, as the dreamt sees it, is synonymous. So the dreamt gets produced. Yeah, let's say you're a spirit or something. You're just there. And then there's a mental activity that implies you're a thing. And the thing is actually the afterthought. It implies you're the doer, the thinker, the feeler, the seer, the taste. That's what it does. And then it pictures being the doer, the thinker, the feeler as a body. And now the body now is the doer, feeler, thinker. Yeah? But it's not the body. It doesn't go right to the body. It gets to the body first through claiming the doing, the thinking, the feeling, the tasting. You might as well be clear, you know. That's what they say, get to the exact nature of the things, the causes and conditions. Well, you know, a lot of us think that a cause, we think an effect is a cause. Like, the effect is fear, the cause is self-reliance. Mostly people think fear's the cause. Yeah? But in fact, the self-reliance is the cause of the fear. It's relying on what you're not provokes an atmosphere of anxiety because you're afraid you're not going to, like we say in recovery, you're not going to get what you want or you're going to lose what you have. That hasn't happened at this very moment, but it doesn't matter. It's projecting it into time. Yeah? So that the feeling of I'm going to lose is produced, it's not produced by losing, it's produced by the prospect of losing. That's the amazing part. You haven't lost a fucking thing. You're fine right now. But you're afraid right now you're going to lose. And it actually, it pushes the experience of right now and it gives you another experience to take its place. An interpretation. Yeah. It's sort of, and we've seemingly forgotten. We don't see the switcheroo. It's sort of like, oh, I'm living, life's happening, and then suddenly life's happening to me. What the fuck? Where was that little switch occur? Yeah, life's happening, and even in moments here, life's happening, like surfing and shit, but then there's a switcheroo. Life's happening to me. And so now you're wondering if anyone saw you catch the wave, and it's just the whole thing changes. Yeah? There's still a lot of life's happening, that's all there is. But the interpretation does a pretty good job of fucking erasing it and going, hey, all right, here, like there was home cooking, then you get a TV dinner. What the fuck? So I was really cooking, I smelled it was sitting really good. Wow, this is like from 2015. It's like stale. I don't even know if you can call it chicken. It's chicken by the name only. Yeah, so, but you eat it and you think, oh, well, that's, you know, this is it. Yeah, this is it. And so now there's a switcheroo, and now you're living an interpretation based on what? On self. You don't have to go to another continent. You can see it all here. I mean, if you like cold caves in Tibet, go ahead. You know what I mean? Potato soup without much potato. Great, go. Yeah. But you'll see the same activity here. Yeah, you will. You'll see it. It's a production. It's produced. Yeah. Now, we don't come to it usually. We start at the product. We don't see that, wow, there's doing, and then there's the impliedness of the doer. But then every time there's a doing, I feel the doer did it. So how did that happen? There's doing, actually, and then there's the claiming of it to imply the doer, but then now I've been living from the point that the doer is doing all the doing. Right? Yes? So there's been a switcheroo. You can say, okay, doesn't matter, don't call the arms, just see it. All right, wait a minute. There was, you know, there's doing, there's seeing, that's easier. You're not doing seeing, are you? I mean, all right, I've been doing seeing all day, you'd be exhausted because you don't know how to fucking see. So you'd be like, you know, is this it? Is this, you know? But there's seeing, yeah? And there's hearing and feeling, tasting, touching. You gotta see that as the starting point with the race. It's not like, but suddenly you're in ready, and then no, the seeing implies the seer. So the starting point is an imaginary point. That's just imagined to be before all the seeing, but has no evidence that it's before all the seeing. There's no evidence to authenticate its assumption. It's just an assumption. It's just a weird fucking assumption that comes from a reaction to seeing. The mental state says, if there's seeing, there must be a seer and a seen, because it's seeing from its programming, and its programming is binary, its programming is dualistic. So seeing is seen as subject-object, all right? And that's what you get fed all day. Yeah, but this is a trip, though. It wouldn't be so bad if there was as many seers as seen. But usually there's only one sense of a seer and tons of things seen. So you're constantly being this pointed at the seer. It would be great if you could see, there's just tons of seers and there's tons of scenes. But there's tons of scenes, but with one seer. That's wait a minute, something's up here. That just doesn't seem like, I don't think that's en natural, you know what I mean? So then you get to see, oh, there's you know, Santa's little helpers, you know, there it is. So there's seeing, claimed. Who claims it? No one. There's just a claiming of it. The mental state, like a fucking machine, claims something. It just, you know, so there's seeing, and it's used to imply the seer seeing. All right, and then the one thing that is consistent in all the seeing of scenes is the seer. So all that's from this point on, all the seeing is going to be attributed to the one seer. Your whole life is going to be attributed to this. It is, right? Tons of scenes, tons of seeing, but one seer. Same thing with hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. All the fucking traffic of consciousness through these 5 gates are being used to imply there's just one. Millions of, let's say, millions and millions and millions, but only one doer. Yet you never see it doing it. You don't see it. You see it doing actions as the body, but you don't see it doing seeing, do you? Hearing, all right, I'm getting ready to feel, you know, no. You're an afterthought. The seeing, the hearing, feeling, tasting, touching is before you. You're made up after it. Yeah? And so you can pretty much assume that's where you came from. Because the seeing, you know what I mean? The feeling of me comes from that. The seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. I'm not the one that's doing that. Something's using that to do me. Yeah? So that's the bondage of self. And then the bondage of self, just unbelievable. Because most people are trying to be free from the bondage of self, which is cool, but as self. So you get bound doubly. Yeah? So self can't get out of self, and I'm telling you, you're wasting time trying to convince this programming to stop that. It's just going to keep trying to get out of self as self. It'll shoot drugs after it knows they don't work. It'll marry another person after it knows there's not going to marriage. It's the 6th one. It's going to keep on. It's just going to change vehicles, and it just keep on. I'm getting out of here as me. Yeah, well, I'm here to tell you it doesn't fucking work for a lot of reasons. One reason is you can't escape an imaginary place. That would sort of defeat, I don't care how slick you are, you ain't getting out of here because there's no here to get out of. Not the here that you're seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, not the here that has been interpreted, no. Because really what you're trying to do is get out of there and then here, really. Yeah, most people are trying to get out of feelings about the past and worries about the future here. Yeah. So I mean, it's like if you went to an archery contest and there was the targets and everyone was pointing the other way, shooting arrows. Don't, before you would start selling advanced bows and sharpening the things, just turn them around. Just say, wait a minute. All right, put the horse in front of the cart. Yeah, now you can be corrected. But fucking, how, you know what I mean? There's so much to correct. You know, just stay exactly as you are. Oh, now I see. Yeah, always been there. As soon as they get corrected, it's always been there. Same way with this. It's always been this way. I've always been exactly what I've always been. There's not been one moment, even though I fervently eyed in it, but the head, this whole apparatus fervently believed it was true. It isn't true. That's the good news. That's what's so great about this message, is that it's actually true. Yeah? And it doesn't need any embellishing of that. All it does is ask you to see what's not true from truth. Not try to see what's not true from what's not true. That doesn't go anywhere. But to see what's not true from truth. Yeah? And then let then all those fixed positions aren't fixed positions. If this changes, it's the game board moves. You know, and you really find it doesn't really need your fucking effort or thought. Actually, your effort and thought is part of one of the bogus moves. Yeah? So, you can't like set off to try to lose interest in yourself as yourself. That would be interest in yourself. Yeah? You can't. If you're that which is playing God, tries to quit playing God, that's playing God. You can't get out of it. Yeah? Once there's the consent of being in it, there's a wanting to get out of it, but you can never get out of it. Yeah? Once the consent that it's real, then there's the drive to get out is always going to reinforce it. It's going to reinforce the reality that it doesn't have. Like Ramana, a great master, presented the same thing, I feel, today. He says there's a presupposing. And supposing is like assuming, yeah? You suppose that the store is open, but it ain't open. You didn't call, you didn't look at it on the internet, you just assumed, oh, fucking Whole Foods will be open, but they're not. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of assumption, and assumptions, there's the mimicking of assumptions because we're in a lot of assumptions. Yeah? So there's the playing of assumptions based on really being in assumptions. So the assumption is that I'm a non-existent thing. That's existing, yeah? So there's the presupposing of a non-existent thing as what? As existing, really. Okay, so that's my starting point, which has been produced. So we start there. And so there's not this, now this existing, non-existent thing wants to get salvation for the non-existent thing, of course, because it feels like it's screwed in a lot of ways. So of course it has the salvation could be like, you know, a fucking 5-minute YouTube video, whatever, just to get out of something constantly. It's like slavery, really. So there's that presupposing of this non-existent thing existing, and then it just assumes that, well, I'm existing in a not that happy condition, I want salvation from these unhappy conditions as the non-existent thing. So so you can see there's a mistake that begets a bigger mistake. So, all right. So the presupposing. So if this assumption, yeah, is pre-assumed, yeah, this is the trick. This is how we miss it a lot. We don't see the ingredient of time in the little magic trick. It's not just an assumption of something. When it's assumed, it's historically assumed. It's been like this for a long time. It's not just the assumption is for now, it's always been this way. Yeah? So the pre is the most important part of it. So now I'm presupposed, let's say, to be fucked. And therefore, obviously, I want to be unfucked. And that unfucked is the bigger fuck. Yeah? Because now you're trying to get out of an assumed condition, which actually promotes the assumed condition. It gets realer and more real the more unreal you try to make it. And we don't see, wait a minute, I am the obscuring agent. You know, I am, as they say in, I am the observation that distorts what's observed. That's basically what I am as an activity identified as this. I am the obscuring agent. I am the reason why all these things that are supposedly always available at all times seem so distant and needing of many, many requirements being met for them to become an experience, maybe for just 5 minutes or 4 minutes, or I'll pay enough money where I can go on a retreat for a week and they'll control the conditions and I'll feel better. Yeah? But it's very precarious. If the money runs out, they're going to boot you out of retreat. Like hospitals with your insurance, or you're going to have to leave sooner or later, and then the same dilemma. So the presupposing, so he goes into this and he says, all right, if this is actually happening, seemingly, it's appearing to be happening, that there's a presupposing of a non-existent thing as existing, and it wants to get salvation for itself, then its spiritual practices themselves are reinforcing the non-existent thing. Yeah? How can they destroy it? This is the big one. So if this one situation's in place, those noble endeavors that seem so righteous, the spiritual pursuit, are actually reinforcing the imaginary thing. So you're wanting to get free as that is giving it life, resuscitation. You're keeping it alive as that by wanting to get out of it. Now, to me, that was a rude awakening, because from this point of view, I had spent a lot of time doing exactly what he just described. I mean, it just hit. It just went. It was like a searchlight going over my whole life from 6 on, and it just, there it was. That was, you could have described it exactly. I'd been trying to get, I was using the Buddha to get out of, to try to get to the Buddha. Yeah. I was using the Buddha to seek the Buddha. Yeah. So then all the failing of that turned into self-centered hate and disappointment and more whipping into fucking effort, was all bogus. All those add-ons were based on a false assumption. Yeah? I am the Buddha. Therefore, to use myself, to find myself, seems completely absurd now. Yeah? And I haven't worked at all on this to change its source code. I realized all the tinkering just reinforces the machinery. I have. Maybe it's not true for you, but for me it was. Yeah, and is. So basically, I don't do anything to get out of Paul anymore, basically, except maybe shopping and shit. Yeah. That's more to get out of time. I have so much time, I got to do something, and I don't want to do anything too profound. You know what I mean? It's a heavy weight. Just mundane shit works good. I don't know. This is how the script continued for me. It did. Read Yankee blogs, very, very mundane shit you couldn't get that excited about. Because I used to see what happened when I was on a noble endeavor of enlightenment. I was pretty full of myself. People would be trying to love me. I don't have time for that. I'm doing my... life came to me, gave me... No! I'm on my calling. It got a little too much. The sphincter was puckered so tight. I had to just... Yeah, it was just good to give it all up if possible. Yeah. So... Now I entertain these ideas, and they haven't been replaced by any others, and they haven't really been disputed. You may not like the messenger, but the message, I think, is pretty clean. And I'm open, you know. I hear a lot of people share, and, you know, I weigh it, and I just see, wow, I just, you know, 1 ounce is too much, really. So just stick to it, stick with it. And I have the AA way of life to keep the action figure. The action figure is pretty subdued now. Old, you know, age is good. A lot of the fires, you know, they simmer down. You know what I mean? It's like, you live like a payoff cost ratio. That looks good, but no, too much cost. You know, you may have an abhorrence to drama and stuff like that. Yeah, I just don't. Gossip, I'm not into that much. None of these things. No one even tells me if they're divorced, because I didn't care if they were married, really. I don't care much. I don't. You know. And I don't care if they know if I was married or divorced. See, that's the point. I'm not doing something to them that I wouldn't do. I just don't care that much. Yeah. What are you going to do? Fake it? What I do is leave the room and let Amelia talk to everybody. I go lay down with my legs up and just go into a trance. Come back. Seems to work. We may have to edit this. I'm giving all my secrets away. No. But yeah, so, and sometimes you can see, this is a good thing to observe. When certain engines that it doesn't have any idea are even on get shut off, you're on to something, yeah? When the system itself starts getting shut off, not the system being aware of shutting other things off, but when it starts and its interest and attention gets moved and distributed differently, and then all you do is observe and you come to certain conclusions, you know, and you're seeing blue is blue and red is red, and you really feel that most of the time this place is like Bizarro World, really. You know, we're trying to get out of what we're not in, and we're trying to get into what we're not out of. I mean, you can't get more bizarro if you know the comics, because it was just the opposite world. Well, I think that was mimicking. We're in this event. We're thinking we're going to arrive at where we already are. So. And I'm going to go into this because it's subtler than this, though. Because the self will try to become a non-self. It will. It will try to mimic what it thinks non-self would look like, but as a self. It will. You can see it. Yeah, so you got to recognize its little maneuvers. Yeah, you don't have to see its whole dance card, just a few. Then you can just forecast the rest. You know, I don't know how many will be for you, but you'll see it in some of its different shades, but it's the same darkness in a way. Yeah. So you catch it. That's what you do. You catch it as you, from what you actually are. You see it. You see the activity. And so you're like, oops. And then you realize it doesn't know any better. Like Jesus supposedly said, hey, you know, forgive them for they do not know what they do. This system, this needs forgiveness. It doesn't have, it's got limited ability. Yeah, it can't break out of its programming. You know, you can do the highest form of drugs, and probably when you come out of the episode, you'll feel like it's you that did the drugs. You know, it's got a pretty stubborn resilience, the programming to regroup. Yeah, you don't need for it to be smashed. You can have it just be exactly as it is, and use it as the constant seeing of what you're not is what you are. So by seeing what you're not, instead of it informing and reinforcing you're not that, you'll use it in a different way. You'll see what you're not, yeah, and you realize it's the seeing of what I'm not is what I am. So it's the same information that's the head wants to use to reinforce the idea of you can actually reinforce its inherent absence. Yeah? So you're the seeing, you're the awareness of what you're not. That's the best you can get here, really. So you're aware of what you're not. And after a while, it's obvious that you are that. Yeah? You bypassed all those minefields of trying to become the one who's aware. Yeah? You did it like a back doorway. You see what you're not, and in seeing what you're not, you get a sense of what you are. Yeah? And what is that? The seeing of what you're not. Yeah? Or just, you can say the seeing, but how it's triggered here is seeing what you're not, because that's what you're seeing all day. Yeah? And so you have it's like in AA they say, first, if you sincerely take a decision, then in time you can get established there. Well, that establishment is already so. So you may feel like you got established, but if you arrive there and you feel like you got established, it feels like you've always been established. It isn't like, oh, I wasn't established, now I am. No, you realize this is always established. What's so is always what's so. Always, always, always what's so. It has nothing, all the winds of time do shit to it. It doesn't fucking get blown away like anything. It's just there. It's just complete contextual. Yeah. So what's that going to do to the poor little rabid, anxious action figure? It's going to chill it out somewhat. Yeah? And then it will realize, hey, my role here isn't the cause of shit. I'm an expression or an observation. I can observe shit and I can express stuff. Watch what I express. If I do a shot of coke, yeah, then I'm going to express something. Why do I express if I, stand near a waterfall? Well, a totally different expression, but I can express a large spectrum of shit. Whatever's taking the system over. Well, there you go. So in recovery, we get to the conclusion we need a power greater than self. That self that's been occupying this opportunity doesn't respect anything other than a higher power. It doesn't respect fucking another self. It doesn't. So we have to allow a higher power to be introduced to the mix, because the big dog of self is a little dog masquerading as a big dog. When the big dog appears, it rolls fucking over. It does. To me, it's rolled over for 31 years. That's not bad. Yeah? Not bad for that thing that was ripping me a new one every day to be subdued. That's pretty damn good. I mean, if that isn't a demonstration, I don't know what is. Yeah? So I'm saying the root of this place is the act of being identified as the doer, the thinker, the feeler, the taster, the toucher, the dreamer, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, yeah? And suddenly you're the noun that's always preceding all the verbs, yeah? And that's an interpretation. I think it's run its course, and a lot of us have run to the end of it, and it's, what's the appropriate response if you've been riding a dead horse to get off? You know what I mean? You want to keep breathing life into it? Fucking, it's a dead horse. Yeah. It can't do what it promised. I'm not going to be free as me. I'm going to be free from me. Yeah, yeah. So.
That's the thing you're saying about doing things without thinking about doing them, they just happen. And like I was saying, when I had my accident, there were things that I've done my entire life that I never thought of doing, but all of a sudden I had to really work to figure out how to do them.
That's right.
And then just that act alone made me think, how many other things do I really just do that I'm not thinking that just occur? And it
well, you'd like that, see that to do the way of the program or the design for living. So I don't think of going to an AA meeting, I think which one. I'm in the habit of doing it.
Exactly, it just is, it's a matter of fact.
It's a habit, exactly. You don't want to have the problem sitting on your board of your corporation, you know, voting. Yeah, just have a sober assessment. Mine was, I'm fucked. And it's never changed. And it's been actually, hallelujah, it's been the greatest. That drive to get out of self as self it didn't look like it was ever going to be altered. It didn't. You were thinking getting run over twice by the same car and the same night would do it. No, nothing did it. It didn't matter what consequences. I was willing to pay any consequence tomorrow not to feel uncomfortable today. So it went pretty far, and sometimes that's the best teaching. If something can go really, really far, it usually reveals itself. If you let it play out, it reveals itself. Now, hopefully you live, you don't die before that, but if you don't die, it's revelatory. You can really see the failedness of the system. Yeah, I mean, and have a sober fucking assessment from an aspect of you that you don't feel is there, really. Like we say in recovery, an unsuspected inner resource becomes quite suspected, and actually you're assured of it. Yeah. Yeah, so any questions? No? That's good. I guess, yeah. I'm happy you're coming, it's great. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Those things are true, they ring true, and then they're out there. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the point is to get whatever little bit of schooling you need to, and then it's basically free range. Fucking, recess. Yeah. It generates all you need to know without further fucking working on it. Yeah. It just generates presence, so to speak. So, all right, let's get in the basket.